Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's largest warship, watching the final preparations for Operation Prometheus. Around him, the combined human fleet stretched across several light years. Over 10,000 ships representing every remaining military vessel in human space. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, and it would either end the war or destroy civilization itself. "Admiral, all task forces report ready," his communications officer announced. "Phase 1 can begin on your command." Torres looked at the tactical display. The collective had retreated to their core worlds, 17 heavily fortified systems that contained the heart of their hive mind. Intelligence suggested that billions of Zephyrians were concentrated in these systems, along with their primary command nodes and breeding facilities. Dr. Warren, final analysis? Dr. Warren, now serving as the fleet's xenobiological warfare specialist, reviewed her data one last time. "Sir, our bioweapons are ready for deployment. The quantum resonance virus will propagate through their hive mind network within minutes of initial exposure. The cascade should reach every collective node in the galaxy." Torres nodded grimly. After months of limited tactical victories, humanity had developed a weapon that could end the war in hours. The virus would attack the fundamental biological structures that allowed the collective's hive mind to function. Without their shared consciousness, individual Zephyrians would die within minutes. Estimated casualty count? Conservative estimate, 40 billion Zephyrians across 200 systems. But sir, this includes their entire reproductive population. If successful, the collective as a species will cease to exist. The bridge fell silent. Even after everything the collective had done, the prospect of complete species extinction was sobering. Torres thought about the billions of humans who had died, the children who had been specifically targeted, the colonies that had been turned into charnel houses. Then he thought about the trillions of beings across the galaxy who would live because the collective could never threaten them again. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Operation Prometheus is now active. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember what they did to our people. Today we end this war." The first phase began with humanity's stealth ships infiltrating the outer defenses of the collective's core systems. Captain Rebecca Nash, commanding the UES Shadow, led a squadron of modified vessels deep into Zephyrian space. Her ships carried the bioweapon packages that would start the cascade. "Contact," her sensor operator whispered. "Collective defensive fleet. Approximately 2 million vessels distributed across the system perimeter." Nash studied the enemy formation. Even facing extinction, the collective had assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. But their numbers wouldn't matter today. Humanity wasn't planning to fight them ship to ship. Deploy the packages. Full stealth protocols. The bioweapon canisters launched silently from Nash's ships, each one no larger than a torpedo, but containing enough viral agents to contaminate an entire star system. The canisters used gravitational slingshots to reach the collective's core worlds, where they would release their contents into the alien atmosphere. Packages away. Estimated time to target 47 minutes. Nash watched as her sensors tracked the weapon's progress. In less than an hour, the war would effectively be over. But the collective wasn't planning to go quietly. Alarms suddenly echoed throughout her ship. "Multiple contacts. Collective forces are converging on our position." The stealth attack had been detected. Thousands of Zephyrian ships were moving to intercept Nash's squadron, but the bioweapons were already on course. All humanity had to do was survive long enough for them to reach their targets. "All ships, prepare for combat. Our job is to buy time for the weapons to reach their targets. Whatever happens to us, the mission continues." Meanwhile, the main human fleet engaged the collective's defensive forces across multiple systems. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a task force of hunter-killer ships, led the assault on the system designated Target Alpha. Enemy fleet strength approximately 800,000 vessels, his tactical officer reported. "They're using a new formation we haven't seen before." Morrison studied the enemy deployment. The collective ships were arranged in concentric spheres around their core worlds, with multiple layers of defense extending out for millions of kilometers. It was the most sophisticated defensive arrangement they'd ever created. "It doesn't matter," Morrison said. "We're not here to break their defenses. We're here to keep them busy." His ships launched a coordinated assault on the outer defensive line. The new human weapons, quantum torpedoes, matter converters, reality distortion fields, tore through the Zephyrian formations. But for every enemy ship destroyed, 10 more took its place. Sir, enemy reinforcements are arriving from adjacent systems. Total enemy count now exceeds 1.5 million vessels. Morrison smiled grimly. The collective was committing everything they had to defend their core worlds. That was exactly what humanity wanted. The more ships they concentrated here, the fewer would be available to threaten human colonies. All task forces, continue the assault. Make them commit every ship they have. In the depths of space, other elements of the human fleet were implementing the final phases of Operation Prometheus. Dr. Amanda Richards, aboard the research vessel UES Darwin, was deploying the last component of humanity's plan. Quantum resonance generators are in position, she reported to Admiral Torres. Once the bioweapon takes effect, these devices will amplify the cascade through subspace. Any collective node that survives the initial attack will be destroyed by the secondary wave. Torres watched as similar reports came in from task forces across the battlefield. Humanity had spent months preparing for this moment, developing weapons and strategies that would ensure the collective's complete destruction. There would be no survivors, no possibility of regeneration, no chance for revenge. Admiral, first contact confirmed, Dr. Warren announced. The bioweapon has reached target Alpha's atmosphere. Viral propagation beginning. On the tactical display, something unprecedented began to happen. The massive collective fleet surrounding target Alpha suddenly stopped moving. Ships that had been engaged in complex maneuvers simply drifted to a halt. The perfect coordination that had made them so dangerous vanished in an instant. Confirmed viral infection across the entire system. Warren continued. The hive mind connection is severing. Individual Zephyrians are beginning to die. Torres watched as 800,000 enemy ships became lifeless hulks floating in space. The bioweapon was working exactly as designed, attacking the fundamental neural structures that connected each Zephyrian to the collective consciousness. Sir, quantum resonance cascade is propagating through subspace, Dr. Richards reported. We're detecting similar effects in adjacent systems. The virus is spreading faster than we anticipated. Across the galaxy, collective fleets suddenly fell silent. Ships that had been pursuing human forces stopped dead in space. Command nodes that had coordinated the movements of billions went dark. The hive mind that had threatened all life in the galaxy simply ceased to exist. In the immediate battle zone, the human fleets found themselves suddenly unopposed. Captain Nash's stealth ships emerged from hiding to discover that the collective forces hunting them had simply shut down. The 2 million ship defensive fleet had become a 2 million ship graveyard. All stations, this is Admiral Torres. Operation Prometheus has succeeded. The collective has been neutralized. All surviving enemy vessels show no signs of activity. The cheers that erupted across the human fleet were audible even through vacuum. After months of devastating warfare, after sacrificing billions of lives, humanity had achieved total victory. But Torres felt no satisfaction as he looked at the tactical display. The red markers showing collective positions were winking out one by one as the bioweapon spread through their networks. In a matter of hours, an entire species would be extinct. Dr. Warren, final casualty estimates? Warren's voice was quiet. Confirmed dead. Approximately 60 billion Zephyrians across 312 systems. The cascade effect reached every collective node in the galaxy. There are no survivors, Torres nodded slowly. And collateral damage? Minimal. The virus was designed to target only Zephyrian neural networks. Other species in collective-controlled space are reporting no adverse effects. Over the following weeks, human rescue fleets spread across former collective territory. They found billions of survivors from dozens of species, beings who had been enslaved or held in processing centers awaiting conversion. The liberation effort was massive, involving not just military vessels but civilian ships converted for humanitarian purposes. Captain Sarah Chen, posthumously promoted to admiral, had become a symbol of human sacrifice and determination. Her sister, Maria Chen, now commanded one of the rescue fleets. Admiral Torres, this is Admiral Chen. We've completed the evacuation of the Altair system. 300 million beings rescued from collective processing facilities. Most will make full recoveries. Torres smiled for the first time in months. Excellent work, Admiral. Any signs of remaining collective activity? Negative, sir. The bioweapon was completely effective. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime sparkled like a jewel in space. Crystal walls rose hundreds of feet into the air, catching and reflecting the light from 3 different suns. Representatives from dozens of alien civilizations sat in perfect rows, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that would have amazed any human who saw it. Ambassador Keelan Torres stood at the center of it all, feeling very small and very alone. She was the only human in a room full of beings who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Her simple blue uniform looked plain next to the flowing robes of the Altarians, or the gleaming metal armor of the Zenthari. The holographic display behind her showed a terrifying sight. Dark shapes moved through space, consuming everything in their path. Stars went dark. Planets disappeared. Entire solar systems vanished as if they had never existed. "These are the Devourers," Torres said, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "Our deep space telescopes detected them 6 months ago at the edge of our galaxy. They move from system to system, taking everything. Nothing stops them." A low murmur ran through the assembled aliens. The Altarians, tall beings made of living crystal, clinked softly as they shifted in their seats. The Zenthari, reptilian warriors covered in natural armor, hissed quietly among themselves. Even the peaceful Nexians, who looked like floating jellyfish made of light, pulsed with nervous energy. Council leader HFY rose from his throne-like chair. He was a Vex, one of the oldest and most respected races in the galaxy. His body was perfectly geometric, like a living sculpture made of silver and blue metal. When he spoke, his voice had the sound of wind chimes. "Ambassador Torres," he said, "we appreciate humanity's concern. But surely you do not presume to understand threats that civilizations far older than yours have faced." Torres felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her voice steady. "With respect, Council Leader, humanity has spent most of its history fighting. We know war. We know how enemies think and adapt. These Devourers are different from anything you have faced before." She touched a control on her wrist device. The holographic display changed, showing the wreckage of several small outposts that had tried to fight the Devourers. "They learn," Torres continued. "Every energy weapon you use against them, they adapt to. Every shield frequency you try, they copy and counter. Your plasma cannons and particle beams will work for maybe one battle, then become useless." Admiral Thexer of the Zenthari stood up, his scales rattling with amusement. He was massive, even for his species, with scars from 100 battles marking his hide. "Little human," he said. "The Zenthari have conquered 17 star systems. Our weapons have never failed us." "Because you fought enemies that use the same technology you do," Torres replied. "The Devourers are machines. They think differently. They adapt faster than you can change tactics." The Altarian representative, a being of pure crystal named Shinth, spoke in a voice like breaking glass. "And what does humanity propose? Your species has barely left its own solar system. You have been in space for less than a century." Torres took a deep breath. This was the moment she had dreaded. "We propose using kinetic weapons, railguns that fire solid metal projectiles, nuclear weapons, chemical explosives, technologies that are simple and hard to adapt to." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the laughter began. It started with a few quiet chuckles from the Zenthari. The Altarians made a sound like ice cracking. Even the normally polite Nexians flickered with what Torres had learned was their version of amusement. Soon the entire chamber echoed with the sounds of dozens of species expressing their ridicule. "Kinetic weapons?" Thexer's voice boomed over the noise. "We abandoned such primitive tools 10,000 years ago." "Nuclear bombs?" Shinth's crystal form pulsed with bright light. "How wonderfully barbaric." HFY raised one geometric hand and the laughter slowly died. "Ambassador Torres, your concern is noted. But the Galactic Council does not wage war with stone clubs and fire. We have evolved beyond such crude methods." Torres felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had known this would be difficult, but she had not expected such complete dismissal. "Council Leader, I am begging you to listen. These creatures will adapt to everything you throw at them. The only way to fight something that learns is to use weapons and tactics it cannot easily understand or copy." "Perhaps," said a new voice, "humanity should focus on its own development before presuming to teach its betters." The speaker was Quintal, representative of the Corvin Principality. His people looked almost human, except for their pale blue skin and completely black eyes. They were known throughout the galaxy for their pride and their belief that they were superior to all other species. Corvin Principality has defended its territory for 5,000 years without losing a single world. Quintal continued. We have never needed the advice of primitives. Torres looked around the chamber, seeing the same expression on every alien face. Some showed amusement, others showed pity, but all showed the same basic emotion: superiority. To them, humanity was a child trying to teach adults how to walk. You are making a mistake, she said quietly. These devourers are not like other enemies. They do not think like living beings. They are pure logic, pure adaptation. Fighting them with advanced technology is like fighting fire with gasoline. HFY's form shifted, the geometric patterns on his surface rearranging themselves into what Torres had learned was a sign of finality. The Galactic Council appreciates humanity's input. However, we have faced many threats in our long history. We have always prevailed through the application of superior technology and civilized tactics. He gestured to the assembled representatives. The combined fleets of 17 civilizations will be more than sufficient to deal with these devourers. We shall use our most advanced weapons, our finest ships, and our most sophisticated battle computers. Victory is assured. And what role will humanity play in this defense? Torres asked, though she already feared the answer. Humanity will remain in its home system, HFY replied. Your ships are too primitive to be of use in modern space combat. Your weapons are too crude to integrate with our advanced targeting systems. We cannot risk having untrained forces interfere with our carefully planned operations. The words hit Torres like physical blows. Not only were they dismissing humanity's warning, they were excluding them from the fight entirely. Her people would have to sit and watch while the galaxy faced its greatest threat without them. You are about to make the greatest mistake in galactic history, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the crystal chamber. When your energy weapons fail, when your shields cannot protect you, when your advanced computers are turned against you, remember this moment. Remember that humanity tried to warn you. She gathered her data tablets and turned toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Thexer's booming laughter. Perhaps when humanity has evolved beyond their violent tendencies, HFY called after her, they will understand true warfare. Torres did not turn around. She walked out of the great hall with her head held high, even though her heart was breaking. In 6 months, the first Devourer ships would reach the outer systems. The greatest military force in galactic history would meet them with energy weapons and advanced tactics, and humanity would watch from Earth as it all fell apart. The massive doors of the council chamber closed behind her. Torres activated her communication device. She had a message to send to Earth, and it was not the one she had hoped to deliver. The galaxy had chosen its path. Soon they would all learn the price of pride. General Sarah Chen stood in the war room deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching holographic displays that showed the galaxy burning. Red markers indicated fallen civilizations. Yellow showed worlds under attack. The few remaining green zones grew smaller each day. Status report, she said to her aide, Colonel Martinez. 17 civilizations have gone completely dark, Martinez replied, his voice grim. The Altarian homeworlds fell yesterday. The Xanthari are down to their last 3 core systems. Total estimated casualties are in the billions. Chen studied the tactical displays with the eye of someone who had spent 30 years learning how to fight and win. The Devourers moved across the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Their pattern was clear. They always struck manufacturing worlds first, then population centers, leaving command planets isolated and helpless. What about the Galactic Council's response? Still refusing direct contact with us, but our deep space monitors are picking up their emergency transmissions. They are calling for volunteers from any species with advanced defensive capabilities. Chen almost smiled. Even facing extinction, the aliens could not bring themselves to ask humans for help directly. Their pride would kill them all. Ma'am, another officer called out, we have incoming transmission from the Council. It is Admiral Thexor, Chen was surprised. The Xanthari Admiral had been one of the most vocal critics of human tactics during the original Council meeting. Put him through. The reptilian face that appeared on screen looked nothing like the confident warrior who had mocked humanity months ago. Thexor's scales were dull and scarred. His eyes held the hollow look of someone who had seen too much death. General Chen, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We The Council fleet has suffered significant losses. I'm sorry to hear that, Admiral. How can humanity help? Thexor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, it was with obvious difficulty. Your ambassador warned us that energy weapons would be ineffective. She was correct. What happened? They learn. Every weapon we use, every tactic we try, they copy and improve within minutes. Our most advanced technology has become useless. Worse than useless. They turn it against us. Chen had been studying devourer tactics for months ever since the first reports came in. Her conclusion matched human military thinking perfectly. When fighting an adaptive enemy, you had to be unpredictable. Admiral, what I am about to suggest will sound insane to you. But if you want to survive, you need to fight like humans. What do you mean? Stop using your advanced weapons. Stop coordinating through computer networks. Stop following standard tactical doctrine. The Devourers can adapt to logic and patterns, but they struggle with chaos. Thexor looked confused. You want us to fight randomly? Not randomly, chaotically. There is a difference. Chaos has patterns, but patterns that are impossible to predict or copy. Human military doctrine is built on controlled chaos, making the enemy react to you instead of the other way around. Chen gestured to her tactical display. We have been preparing our own response to the Devourer threat. Would you like to see how humans wage war? 6 hours later, the human fleet reached the Rigel system, where Devourer ships were harvesting the metal from 3 destroyed planets. It was not an impressive sight by galactic standards. 50 human ships, most of them converted civilian vessels. No sleek energy weapons or crystal hulls. Just steel and ceramic armor with railguns and nuclear missile tubes. Captain Maria Santos commanded the lead ship, a former mining vessel called the Stubborn Mule. She had been a cargo hauler until the war started. Now she was humanity's first line of defense against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. Target acquired, her weapons officer reported. Devourer harvester ship, approximately 2 kilometers long. It appears to be stripping metal from the planetary core. Load kinetic penetrators, Santos ordered. Maximum velocity. The Stubborn Mule's railgun fired a solid tungsten rod at 20% the speed of light. No energy signature to analyze, no complex technology to copy. Just a piece of metal moving very, very fast. The rod punched through the Devourer ship like a bullet through tissue paper. The enemy vessel began to break apart, pieces of it spinning away into space. Direct hit. The weapons officer shouted. Target destroyed. But Santos was not celebrating. She was watching the other Devourer ships, waiting to see how they would react. According to human analysis, they should be confused by the simplicity of the attack. They were. The Devourers moved toward the human fleet, but their formation was uncertain. They had analyzed thousands of energy weapon attacks and knew how to counter them all. But this was something new, something old. Their databases had no recent information about kinetic weapons. All ships engage at will, Santos transmitted. Remember, no patterns, no coordination. Every ship fights its own battle. What followed would have horrified any traditional military commander. The human fleet broke apart, each ship attacking independently. Some used railguns, others used nuclear torpedoes. A few simply rammed Devourer ships, their captains sacrificing themselves to take out larger targets. It was chaotic, wasteful, and completely effective. The Devourers tried to adapt, but there was nothing consistent to adapt to. Every human ship fought differently. Some attacked head-on, others used hit-and-run tactics. When the Devourers adjusted their defenses for railgun attacks, the humans switched to missiles. When they prepared for missiles, the humans used ramming attacks. Ma'am, the tactical officer called out. The Devourers are withdrawing. Santos could barely believe it. The enemy that had crushed the greatest fleet in galactic history was retreating from 50 converted cargo ships. But victory came at a cost. 15 human ships had been destroyed, including several by ramming attacks. 200 brave men and women were dead, people who had volunteered to fight an enemy that no one else could stop. Send a message to Earth, Santos ordered. Tell them the chaos strategy works. But also tell them... She paused, looking at the wreckage floating around them. Tell them this is going to cost us everything. Back on Earth, General Chen received Santos's report with mixed emotions. The strategy worked, but at a terrible price. Humans were winning battles, but losing ships and crews at a rate they could not sustain. Worse, intelligence reports indicated that the Devourers were already beginning to adapt to human tactics. They would not be caught off guard again. Chen opened a secure channel to the Galactic Council. It was time to share what humanity had learned, whether the aliens wanted to hear it or not. Council leader HFY, she said when the geometric alien appeared on screen, "We need to talk." General Chen, "We have heard reports of human victories against the Devourers. The Council is interested in your methods. Interested enough to listen this time?" There was a long pause. "What do you require?" "First, stop using energy weapons entirely. Switch to kinetic systems, railguns, mass drivers, even chemically propelled projectiles. Second, abandon your computer-coordinated tactics. Every ship needs to fight independently. You are asking us to abandon 10,000 years of military advancement. I am asking you to survive." The Devourers adapt to advancement. They cannot adapt to what they perceive as regression. Chen brought up a tactical display showing human battle footage. This is how chaos warfare works. No two ships do the same thing. No predictable patterns. The enemy cannot adapt to what it cannot understand. And the casualties? Chen's face was grim. High. Chaos warfare is effective, but it is not efficient. We will lose many ships and many good people, but we will win. HFY's geometric form shifted. Patterns rearranging themselves in what Chen had learned indicated deep thought. "The Council will consider your proposal." "Don't consider it too long," Chen warned. "The Devourers are learning. Every day we wait makes this harder." After the transmission ended, Chen stared at the galaxy map. Humanity had found a way to fight the Devourers, but it would require sacrifices that no one was prepared to make. The question was whether the galaxy's proud civilizations would swallow their pride long enough to learn from the species they had dismissed as primitive. Outside her window, she could see construction crews working on new ships. Not beautiful vessels like the aliens built, but ugly. Functional warships designed for one purpose: to fight an enemy that could not be fought with logic. The galaxy would learn to fight like humans, or it would die. There were no other options left. Admiral James Park stood on the bridge of the UHSF Defiance, watching the greatest battle of his life unfold around the Centauri Gate. The massive space station had been humanity's first foothold outside the Sol system, and now it was the last barrier between the Devourers and Earth itself. The enemy fleet was massive, over 3,000 ships that moved with the perfect coordination of a single mind. They had learned much since their first encounters with human forces. Their hulls now showed evidence of adaptation: thicker armor against kinetic weapons, electronic warfare systems to disrupt human communications, and new weapons designed specifically to counter human tactics. But the Allied fleet facing them was different from anything seen before in galactic history. Human ships flew alongside hastily converted alien vessels. Centauri cruisers had their elegant energy weapons stripped out and replaced with crude railguns. Altarian crystal ships carried nuclear missiles instead of focused light beams. Even the proud Corvan Principality had swallowed their arrogance and mounted kinetic cannons on their sleek hulls. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving transmissions from all Allied ships. They are ready for your command." Park nodded grimly. The past months had been a nightmare of crashed training programs and cultural clashes. Teaching proud alien races to fight like humans had been like trying to teach philosophers to brawl in bars. But desperation was a powerful teacher. "Signal all ships," Park ordered. "Operation Broken Arrow is a go. Every captain fights their own battle. No coordination, no patterns. Make it up as you go along." The response was immediate chaos. Human ships accelerated directly toward the enemy, firing kinetic rounds and nuclear torpedoes. But now they were joined by alien vessels using the same tactics. A Centauri captain named Kethavar had become particularly good at human-style warfare, using his ship's superior armor to ram Devourer vessels while firing railguns at point-blank range. The Altarian commander Shinth had been horrified when first ordered to use primitive weapons. But now she wielded nuclear missiles with deadly precision. Her crystal ship's ability to repair itself made her perfect for suicide runs that no human vessel could survive. "Enemy fleet responding," the tactical officer reported. "They are adapting to our kinetic weapons but having trouble with the variety of attack patterns." Park watched the battle unfold with the eye of a professional soldier. The Devourers were learning but not fast enough. Human chaos doctrine meant that no two ships fought the same way. making adaptation nearly impossible. A wing of modified Nexian fighters swept past the Defiance, their peaceful jellyfish-like forms now bristling with missile pods. They moved in seemingly random patterns, firing at targets of opportunity. When the Devourers tried to predict their movements, the Nexians simply changed tactics entirely. "Sir, Devourer heavy cruiser approaching our starboard side," the weapons officer announced. "Load AP rounds and target their engine section," Park commanded. "But use the old firing solution, the one from 3 battles ago. It was a gamble. Using outdated tactics should have been suicide against an adaptive enemy. But that was the beauty of fighting like humans. Sometimes the wrong choice was the right choice." The tungsten rounds punched through the Devourer ship's hull exactly where its new armor was weakest. The enemy had adapted their defenses for current human tactics, not old ones. The ship broke apart in a brilliant explosion, but victory was coming at a terrible cost. Park could see human and allied ships dying all around him. The converted mining ship Prosperity took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of nuclear fire. The Xanthari vessel Bloodclaw rammed a Devourer destroyer, destroying both ships in the collision. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, "Captain Martinez is requesting permission to implement the Madrid Protocol." Park's blood ran cold. The Madrid Protocol was humanity's last resort. A coordinated nuclear bombardment that would destroy everything in a target area, including the ships delivering it. "Negative," Park said firmly. "We are not there yet. Sir, with respect, Captain Martinez says his ship is lost anyway. He wants to take as many of them with him as possible." Park looked at the tactical display. Martinez's ship, the Buenos Aires, was surrounded by Devourer vessels. Her engines were gone, her weapons mostly offline. She was dead in space. "Permission granted," Park said quietly. "Tell Captain Martinez. Tell him humanity will remember. What happened next became legend throughout the galaxy. The Buenos Aires, her hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere, accelerated directly toward the center of the Devourer formation using emergency thrusters. Every nuclear weapon on board was set to detonate simultaneously. Captain Martinez's final transmission was heard across the entire fleet. "For Earth. For the galaxy. For everyone who said we were too primitive to matter." The explosion lit up space like a new star. When the light faded, 17 Devourer ships were gone, vaporized in the nuclear fire. The Buenos Aires and her crew of 87 were gone with them. "All ships," Park transmitted, his voice thick with emotion. "You have just witnessed what it means to fight like a human. Captain Martinez showed us that sometimes the oldest solutions are the best solutions. Honor his sacrifice. Make it count." The battle raged for 6 more hours. When it was over, the Allied fleet had achieved something that had seemed impossible. They had stopped a major Devourer offensive. The enemy fleet withdrew, their ships damaged and their coordination disrupted by the chaotic human tactics. But the cost had been devastating. Of the 200 ships that had started the battle, only 70 remained functional. Human casualties alone numbered in the thousands. The alien losses were equally severe. Park stood on his damaged bridge, looking out at the wreckage floating around the Centauri Gate. Pieces of ships from a dozen different species drifted past his viewport, testament to the price of victory. "Sir," his aide approached carefully, "we are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. Council Leader HFY wants to speak with you personally." Park was too tired to feel surprised. "Put him through." The geometric form of the Vex leader appeared on the main screen. For the first time since Park had known him, HFY looked diminished somehow, less certain. "Admiral Park," the alien leader said, "the Council has been monitoring your battle. We owe humanity an apology." "You owe humanity nothing," Park replied. "We fight because it is the right thing to do, not because we expect gratitude. Nevertheless, we were wrong. Your tactics, your weapons, your entire approach to warfare, we dismissed it as primitive. We see now that primitive does not mean ineffective." Park nodded slowly. "The Devourers are learning our methods. This victory will not be repeated easily. They will adapt." "Then what do you suggest?" "Total war," Park said without hesitation. "Every species, every ship, every weapon. We teach your people to fight like humans, and we hit the Devourers everywhere at once. If we give them time to adapt, we lose. The Council will need to vote." "The Council needs to act," Park interrupted. "While you debate, more worlds die. While you maintain your dignity, the galaxy burns. There was a long silence. Finally, HFY spoke. What do you need? Everything. Every ship you can spare, converted to kinetic weapons. Every crew retrained in chaos doctrine. And you need to accept that we are going to lose a lot of people. How many? Park looked out at the debris field again, thinking of Captain Martinez and the 87 souls who had died with him. All of them, if necessary. That is what it means to fight like a human. We do not count the cost until after we win. The transmission ended, leaving Park alone with his thoughts. Through his window, he could see construction crews already at work, salvaging what they could from the wreckage. New ships would be built, new crews trained. The war would go on, but something had changed today. The galaxy's proud civilizations had finally learned what humanity had always known. Sometimes survival required abandoning everything you thought you knew about fighting. Sometimes the only way to win was to be willing to lose everything. The Devourers were learning human tactics, but they were also learning something else, that humans, and those who fought like them, would never surrender, no matter what the cost. Park opened a communication channel to Earth. General Chen, this is Admiral Park. The Centauri gate holds. But we need to talk about the next phase. The enemy is adapting faster than we hoped. Understood, Admiral. Report to Earth for debriefing. And Admiral? Good work out there, Park almost smiled. Good work. They had saved a star system and maybe bought the galaxy a few more months. In human terms, that was indeed good work. Outside his window, the first of the new ships was already taking shape. Commander Elena Vasquez floated in the command center of the UHSF Prometheus, watching the galaxy's last hope prepare for what everyone knew would be the final battle. Around her, the largest fleet in galactic history spread out across space. 10,000 ships from 47 different species, all united by desperation and the hard-learned lessons of human warfare. The Devourers had been pushed back to the galactic core, where they had built their central processing nexus around a massive black hole. From there, their machine intelligence coordinated attacks across 1,000 light-years. Every tactical decision, every adaptation, every counter-strategy flowed from that one location. Status report, Vasquez called out to her mixed human-alien crew. All fleets report ready, replied Lieutenant Kethavar, the Xanthari officer who had become one of humanity's most skilled pupils in chaos warfare. The Altarian crystal ships are loaded with nuclear charges. The Nexian fighters are armed with kinetic penetrators. Even the Corvin Principality has their ramming ships in position. Vasquez nodded grimly. It had taken 3 years of desperate war to reach this point. 3 years of teaching proud aliens to fight dirty, to abandon their elegant tactics for brutal effectiveness. 3 years of watching entire species learn that survival sometimes required becoming something you never wanted to be. The cost had been staggering. Earth's population had dropped by 30% as volunteers left for the war, knowing they would never return. The beautiful crystal cities of Altair were dark ruins. The great libraries of Nexus Prime had been converted to weapons factories. The galaxy that survived this war would be very different from the one that had started it. Incoming transmission from the Council, the communications officer announced. Council leader. HFY appeared on the main screen, his geometric form showing the stress of 3 years of constant war. Behind him, Vasquez could see the other surviving council members. Admiral Thexer with his battle-scarred hide, Captain Santos who had lost an arm in the Rigel campaign, and dozens of others who had learned to fight like humans. Commander Vasquez, HFY said, the final vote has been taken. Operation Prometheus is approved by unanimous consent. Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine. Operation Prometheus was humanity's ultimate gift to the galaxy. The complete transfer of all human military knowledge, tactics, and strategic thinking to every surviving species. It also included something else, the human doctrine of acceptable losses. Council leader, you understand what this means. Once we share complete chaos doctrine, there is no going back. Your people will fight like humans forever. We understand, HFY replied. We also understand that fighting like humans is the only reason any of us are still alive. The geometric alien paused, his patterns shifting, and what Vasquez had learned was deep emotion. 3 years ago, we called humanity primitive. We dismissed your warnings and excluded you from our defense. Now we ask you to lead the final battle that will determine whether any of us survive. We are honored by your trust, Vasquez said formally. Then in a more human tone, she added, we will not let you down. The transmission ended and Vasquez turned to her tactical display. The Devourer Nexus lay ahead, protected by nearly 5,000 enemy ships. Intelligence suggested that destroying the Nexus would cripple the Devourer network across the entire galaxy, but reaching it would require fighting through the most concentrated defenses ever assembled. All ships, she transmitted to the fleet. This is Commander Vasquez. Today we end this war one way or another. You have all learned to fight like humans over these past years. Now I ask you to do something harder. I ask you to die like humans. She paused, looking out at the thousands of ships that represented the last hope of galactic civilization. We go into this battle knowing that most of us will not come home. That is the price of victory. That is the human way. The attack began with a coordinated nuclear bombardment that lit up the galactic core like a second sun. But this was not the elegant, precise warfare the galaxy had once practiced. This was human warfare. Brutal, chaotic, and utterly devastating. Altarian crystal ships, their hulls packed with antimatter charges, accelerated directly toward Devourer positions. When they detonated, the explosions were visible from light years away. Zenthari ramming ships followed, their armor-plated hulls smashing through enemy formations like bullets through glass. The Devourers responded with everything they had learned about human tactics. They fired kinetic weapons, used unpredictable movement patterns, even attempted ramming attacks of their own. But they were still machines, still bound by logic and programming. They could copy human tactics, but they could not understand human spirit. Breakthrough in Sector 7, Kethvar reported. Captain Santos has cleared a path to the Nexus. Vasquez looked at the tactical display and felt her heart sink. Santos had cleared the path by ramming her ship into a Devourer command vessel, destroying both. The explosion had created a gap in the enemy lines, but it had cost them one of their best commanders. All ships, exploit the breach, Vasquez ordered. Maximum acceleration, all weapons free. The Prometheus led the charge into the gap, her railguns firing continuously. Around her, ships from a dozen species followed, their crews screaming battle cries in languages that had never been heard together before this war. The fighting was desperate and personal. Ships grappled with enemy vessels, crews boarding Devourer ships to plant explosives manually. The Nexian commander Jira sacrificed her entire squadron to destroy a single Devourer heavy cruiser. Admiral Thexer's flagship took on 3 enemy vessels simultaneously, her crew fighting hand-to-hand in the corridors when their weapons failed. "Commander," the tactical officer called out, "we have a clear shot at the Nexus, but the approach is heavily defended." Vasquez studied the display. The Devourer Nexus was visible now, a massive structure built around the event horizon of the black hole, pulsing with the energy of a captured star. Destroying it would require someone to get close enough to deliver a massive explosive payload directly into its core. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "The Prometheus will make the final run. All other vessels provide covering fire." "Ma'am," Lieutenant Kethvar said quietly, "the Prometheus cannot survive that approach. The radiation alone will kill us before we reach the target." "I know," Vasquez replied. "That is why we are going alone. No point in wasting more ships." She opened a fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Commander Vasquez. The Prometheus is beginning her final approach. It has been an honor serving with all of you. Tell the galaxy what happened here. Tell them that humans and aliens died together to save everything we love." The Prometheus accelerated toward the Nexus, her hull already beginning to glow from the intense radiation. Behind her, the combined fleet fought desperately to keep the Devourers from interfering with her run. Explosions bloomed around the human ship as enemy fire found its mark. Her armor was stripped away piece by piece, but she kept flying. When her engines failed, the crew used emergency thrusters. When her weapons went offline, they prepared to ram the target. "Hull breach on all decks," the engineering officer reported. "Radiation levels are lethal. We have maybe 5 minutes before life support fails completely." "That is 4 minutes longer than we need," Vasquez said calmly. "Arm all nuclear charges. Set them for maximum yield." The Nexus grew larger in their view screen, a structure so vast it seemed to bend space around itself. At its heart, Vasquez could see the pulsing core where the Devourer consciousness resided, the electronic brain that had orchestrated the death of countless worlds. "This is for Earth," she whispered. "This is for everyone who said we were too primitive to matter." The Prometheus struck the Nexus at nearly light speed, her hull packed with enough nuclear explosives to crack a moon. The explosion that followed was unlike anything ever seen in galactic history. The nexus structure collapsed into the black hole, taking the Devourer consciousness with it. Across the galaxy, Devourer ships suddenly stopped moving. Their perfect coordination was gone, replaced by confused individual actions. Without their central intelligence, they became just machines, dangerous but no longer unstoppable. The surviving fleet watched in awed silence as the light of the explosion faded. They had won, but the cost had been everything humanity had to give. The Prometheus was gone, along with Elena Vasquez and her crew of 200. Earth's space fleet was reduced to a handful of damaged ships. Humanity had saved the galaxy by sacrificing itself. In the months that followed, the surviving species rebuilt their worlds using human military doctrine. They established new governments based on human principles of cooperation and sacrifice. They created monuments to the species that had taught them that being primitive sometimes meant being right. On Nexus Prime, where the Galactic Council once dismissed humanity's warnings, a new monument was erected. It was simple black stone carved with words in a dozen languages, to humanity, who warned us when we wouldn't listen, and saved us when we couldn't save ourselves. They paid the final price so that others might live. Council leader HFY stood before the monument on the anniversary of the victory, addressing representatives from 47 species who had learned to fight like humans. Ambassador Kethavar's 4 eyes never left the scanning screens in his monitoring station. For 300 years he had watched the empty space at the edge of the galaxy. Nothing ever came from that direction. Nothing ever should. The Zephyrian Collective had given him this job because his species was known for patience. They could sit still for days without moving. Perfect for watching the dark places where nothing lived. Perfect for a job that never had surprises. That's why the sudden flash of light on his screen made all 4 of his eyes blink at once. Impossible, he whispered in his native clicking language. His long fingers moved quickly over the controls. The scanner must be broken. Space debris, maybe. Or an old satellite finally falling apart. But the readings kept coming. Ships. Multiple ships. Big ones. Kethavar's breathing holes fluttered with panic. He activated the emergency communication system that had never been used in his lifetime. His voice cracked as he spoke into the transmitter. Central Command, this is Deep Watch Station Epsilon. I have unknown vessels approaching from the Void Sector. Repeat, unknown vessels from the Void Sector. The response came back quickly. Station Epsilon, confirm your readings. The Void Sector has been empty for 800,000 years. Confirmed, Central Command. Multiple large vessels. They're moving in formation. Silence on the other end. Then, Epsilon, maintain watch. Fleet Command is dispatching investigation ships. Do not approach the unknown vessels. Kethavar watched his screens as the ships came closer. They were like nothing in the galactic databases. Smooth and curved, almost like they had been grown instead of built. They moved through space in perfect harmony, like a school of fish swimming through water. When the Council investigation fleet arrived 3 hours later, Kethavar felt relief wash through his breathing holes. Commander Ithak's heavy cruiser was a comfortable sight. The Brutalan military was known throughout the galaxy for their strength and efficiency. Unknown vessels. This is Commander Ithak of the Galactic Council Defense Force. Identify yourself and state your purpose. The response came immediately. The voice was clear and spoke in perfect galactic standard. But there was something about it that made Kethavar's skin crawl. Too calm, too measured. Greetings, Commander Ithak. This is Dr. Sarah Chenokafor, representing the human colonial fleet. We request permission to approach Council. Space for diplomatic contact. The silence that followed lasted so long that Kethavar thought his communication system had broken. Finally, Commander Ithak's voice came back, much quieter than before. Repeat your identification. Human Colonial Fleet. We seek an audience with the Galactic Council. Commander Ithak's next transmission was directed to Central Command, but Kethavar could hear it on the emergency channel. Central Command, patch me through to the Council archives immediately. Emergency historical lookup required. While they waited, Kethavar pulled up his own historical files. Every Council citizen learned basic galactic history in school. The name human was familiar but old, very old. The archives came back with information that made Kethavar's 4 hearts beat faster. Humans. The aggressive species, the ones who had been banished from the galaxy 800,000 years ago for being too dangerous. The ones who started wars everywhere they went. The ones who couldn't control their violent nature. Everyone knew the story. It was taught as a lesson about what happened when primitive species were given advanced technology too early. The humans had been a young race when they joined the council. They seemed friendly at first, but they couldn't stop fighting. They turned every disagreement into a battle. They saw enemies everywhere, even among their allies. Finally, the council had no choice. The humans were stripped of their membership and forced to leave council space. Their homeworld was quarantined. They were told never to return. That was 800,000 years ago. Long enough for entire species to evolve and disappear. Long enough for stars to be born and die. Long enough for the humans to become a story told to children about the dangers of unchecked aggression. But now they were back. Commander Ethak's voice crackled over the communication system. Human vessels, you are ordered to maintain your current position. Any attempt to advance will be considered an act of war. Understood, Commander. We will hold position and await the Council's decision. The calmness in the human voice bothered Kethvar. 800,000 years ago, according to the records, humans were quick to anger. They shouted and threatened when they didn't get their way. This voice showed no emotion at all. Over the next few days, more council ships arrived. Representatives from dozens of species came to see the impossible sight. The humans waited patiently in their strange ships, never moving, never demanding, never threatening. The ship designs bothered everyone who saw them. They looked organic, like they had grown instead of being built. The surface seemed to shift and move when nobody was looking directly at it. Some sensors could see them clearly, while others showed nothing at all. Dr. Vexani, the Council's chief scientist, arrived on the 5th day. Her insectoid species was known for their analytical minds. She spent hours studying the human ships with every scanner and detector the Council had. Her report was disturbing. The ships appear to be both technological and biological. The hull material is unknown to our databases. Energy readings are inconsistent. Sometimes they show massive power signatures, sometimes they show nothing at all. It's as if the ships exist in multiple states simultaneously. The debate in the council chambers went on for weeks. The older species, those whose ancestors remembered the humans, wanted them destroyed immediately. They're dangerous, insisted Senator Mordak of the ancient hegemony. Our ancestors banished them for good reason. 800,000 years isn't long enough to change what they are. But the younger species were curious. Perhaps they've learned, suggested Representative Flux of the new Commonwealth. 800,000 years is a long time. Maybe they've changed. Finally, after much argument, the council reached a decision. They would meet with the humans, but under strict conditions. Only 3 human representatives would be allowed on Council Prime. They would be surrounded by guards at all times. Any sign of aggression would result in immediate expulsion. The human response came quickly. We accept your conditions. 3 of our representatives will come to Council Prime tomorrow. That night, Kethvar couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the voice on the communication system. Too calm, too perfect. The old records described humans as emotional and unpredictable. But this voice had been like a computer. What had 800,000 years in the void done to the humans? The next morning, a small shuttle detached from the lead human ship. It moved differently than the larger vessels, more like a normal spacecraft. But even it had the same organic look, the same shifting quality that made it hard to focus on. The shuttle docked with Council Prime without incident. Security was tighter than it had been in centuries. Guards from a dozen different species surrounded the docking bay. Weapons were charged and ready. The airlock opened. 3 figures stepped out. They were human, clearly. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. But something was wrong. They moved too smoothly, too perfectly. Their eyes were human eyes, but they seemed to contain depths that went on forever. When they spoke, their voices carried harmonics that made the translation system struggle. The lead figure stepped forward. She was tall for a human with dark skin and silver hair. Her age was impossible to determine. She could have been 30 or 300. I am Dr. Sarah Chen Okafor, she said. Her voice was the same one that had spoken from the ships. Too calm, too perfect. We thank the council for agreeing to meet with us. Senator Mordak, who had insisted on being present despite the danger, stared at her with all 6 of his eyes. You're not what the records described. Dr. Chen Okafor smiled. It was a perfectly human smile, but it never reached her eyes. 800,000 years is a long time, Senator. We've learned much since we left. The walk to the council chambers was silent except for the sound of footsteps. The humans moved with perfect coordination, as if they shared the same mind. Guards and officials tried not to stare, but couldn't help themselves. As they entered the Great Hall where 847 species gathered to govern the galaxy, Kethvar watched from his position in the observer's gallery. He had traveled from his monitoring station specifically to see this moment. The humans looked so small standing in the center of the vast chamber, but somehow they seemed to fill the entire space with their presence. Dr. Chen Okafor looked around the chamber, her strange eyes taking in every face, every species, every detail. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to every corner of the room. 800,000 years ago, you judged us unfit for galactic civilization. Today we return to offer you a gift. The chamber erupted in noise as hundreds of species began talking at once, but the humans stood perfectly still in the center of it all, waiting with the patience of stones. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been this quiet. 847 species sat in perfect silence, staring at the three humans standing in the center of the hall. Dr. Sarah Chen Okafor waited patiently, her hands folded behind her back. While chaos swirled in the minds of everyone watching, Council Speaker Vorthak finally found his voice. The ancient crystalline being had lived for over 50,000 years and had seen many strange things. But never anything like this. Dr. Chen Okafor, he said, his voice resonating through the crystal formations that made up his body. Before we discuss any gifts, the Council must understand what humanity has become during your exile. Of course, Speaker Vorthak. Her voice carried that same perfect calm that had bothered Ambassador Kethvar from the beginning. We understand your concern. We are no longer the species you remember. She gestured to her two companions. This is Dr. James Okoye Singh and Dr. Maria Santos Kim. We represent what humanity has evolved into during our time in the void. Senator Mordak leaned forward in his seat, his 6 eyes focused intently on the humans. The records say your species was violent and unpredictable. You started fights over minor disagreements. You saw enemies and friends. What makes you think 800,000 years could change your fundamental nature? Dr. Chen Okafor tilted her head slightly. The movement was perfectly human, but somehow it looked wrong. Too precise, too calculated. Senator Mordak, your species has an interesting history with change. Your people evolved from hunters who killed anything that moved differently, yet here you sit, one of the most peaceful species in the galaxy. Evolution is possible for any species given time and motivation. The fact that she knew such specific details about Mordak's species history sent whispers through the chamber. That information wasn't common knowledge. How do you know that? Demanded Senator Kexlara of the Hive. Collective. We've had 800,000 years to study, replied Dr. Okoye Singh. His voice had the same perfect quality as Chen Okafor's. When you have nothing but time and space, learning becomes your only companion. Speaker Vorthak's crystal body chimed softly, a sign of deep thought. Tell us about your exile. What happened after you left council space? Dr. Chen Okafor closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they seemed to contain stars. We were angry at first, she began. Your species remember correctly. We were violent and quick to fight. When the council banished us, many wanted to return with weapons and force our way back in. She paused, looking around the chamber, but something happened that changed everything. Our ships were forced to travel through the deep void between galaxies, space that had never known life. Empty regions where reality itself was thin. What do you mean thin? Asked Dr. Vexani from her position in the scientific observer section. Dr. Santos Kim answered this time. In the deep void, the barriers between dimensions become weak. We encountered things that exist outside normal space and time, entities of pure thought, beings made of mathematics, concepts given form. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Several species were known for their ability to detect supernatural phenomena, and all of them had begun to show signs of distress. These encounters changed us, Dr. Chen Okafor continued. At first, contact with such beings drove many humans insane. But over time, we learned to adapt. We began to understand that consciousness itself could be modified, expanded, evolved. She gestured to herself and her companions. We are no longer purely biological. Our minds exist partially in dimensions beyond normal space. We think in ways that transcend individual consciousness. What you see before you are three bodies, but we share aspects of the same expanded awareness. The implications of her words sent shockwaves through the chamber. Representative Flux of the New Commonwealth stood up quickly. You're saying you've become some kind of collective mind? Like the hive species? No, Dr. Okoye Singh replied. The hive species share thoughts but remain individual. We have moved beyond the concept of individual versus collective. We exist in a state that encompasses both and neither. Senator Mordak's voice was sharp with suspicion. Prove it. The three humans looked at each other. No words were spoken, but something passed between them. Dr. Chen Okafor smiled. Senator Mordak, you're thinking about your youngest offspring right now, the one who just began training in quantum mathematics. You're proud but worried because the training is dangerous for developing minds. Mordak jumped to his feet. How could you possibly know that? That information is private. Dr. Vexani, Dr. Santos Kim said, turning to the scientist. You've been working on a theory about consciousness existing in quantum foam. You believe that thoughts themselves might be a fundamental force of the universe. You've never published this theory because you fear your colleagues will think you've gone mad. Dr. Vexani made a sharp clicking sound of shock. Her antennae trembled. Speaker Vorthak, Dr. Okoye Singh addressed the ancient being. Your crystal matrix is showing early signs of entropy decay. You have perhaps another 1,000 years before your consciousness begins to fragment. You've told no one because you don't want to cause panic about succession. The chamber erupted in noise. Hundreds of voices rose in fear, anger, and confusion. The humans stood calmly in the center of it all, unmoved by the chaos around them. Speaker Vorthak's voice rang out above the noise, calling for order. When the chamber finally quieted, his crystal body was glowing with a dim, worried light. How? He asked simply. Dr. Chen Okafor's expression became almost sad. When consciousness expands beyond individual boundaries, certain limitations disappear. Privacy, secrets, the barriers between minds. These become concepts rather than realities. You're reading our minds, accused Senator Kexalara. Not exactly, Dr. Santos Kim replied. Reading implies taking information from an outside source. What we do is more like remembering. When consciousness exists partially outside of normal space-time, the distinction between self and other becomes less meaningful. Representative Hith of the Energy Collective spoke up, his voice crackling with electrical discharge. This is exactly why your species was banished. You're still dangerous. Now you're dangerous in ways we can't even understand. Dr. Chen Okafor turned to face him. Representative Hythe, we understand your fear. But consider this. If we meant harm, would we announce our abilities so openly? Would we come here with only 3 representatives and no weapons? Maybe you don't need weapons, Hythe replied. We don't, Dr. Okoye Singh said simply. But that doesn't mean we intend harm. Senator Mordak was still standing, his 6 eyes fixed on the humans. What do you want from us? Why did you really come back? Dr. Chen Okafor looked around the chamber again. Her strange eyes seemed to see not just the present moment, but layers of possibility stretching into the future. We came back because we've seen what's coming, she said. 800,000 years of traveling through the deep void taught us many things. One of them is how to perceive time non-linearly. We've seen the threads of causality that lead to the future. What future? Demanded Speaker Vorthak. A future where galactic civilization faces a threat that will destroy all consciousness in this galaxy, a threat that can only be survived through perfect unity and coordination between all species. The chamber fell silent. Again, Dr. Santos Kim continued where Chen Okafor left. Off. The entities we encountered in the void weren't just beings of pure thought. Some of them were refugees, survivors from other galaxies that had already fallen to this threat. They taught us what's coming and how to prepare for it. What kind of threat? Asked Dr. Vexani. Dr. Okoye Singh answered. Something that consumes consciousness itself. It spreads between galaxies, leaving behind empty space where thinking beings once existed. It's already destroyed millions of galaxies. This one is next. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several representatives began talking urgently into their communication devices, sending emergency messages to their home worlds. How long do we have? Speaker Vorthak asked. Dr. Chen Okafor closed her eyes again. When she opened them, they seemed to contain the weight of eternity. If we begin preparations immediately, Using the methods we've developed during our exile, we have a chance. If the galaxy remains divided as it is now, fighting over territory and resources, then perhaps 50 years before the first scouts arrive. And you expect us to trust you? Senator Mordak's voice was full of suspicion. The species that was banished for violence and aggression? You come back claiming to be our saviors. Dr. Santos Kim looked directly at him. We don't expect trust, Senator. Trust is something that must be earned. We expect you to verify everything we tell you through your own methods. We expect you to test our claims and examine our evidence. What evidence? Demanded Representative Flux. Dr. Chen Okafor smiled again. That same perfectly human smile that never reached her eyes. Tomorrow we'll begin demonstrating what we learned during our exile. We'll solve problems that have plagued the galaxy for millennia. We'll heal what was thought unhealable and repair what was thought permanently broken. She paused, looking around the chamber one more time. And then you'll understand that the choice isn't whether to trust us. The choice is whether to let us help you prepare for what's coming. 3 months had passed since the humans arrived at Council Prime. Dr. Sarah Chen Okafor and her companions had been given quarters in the diplomatic section, under constant but respectful guard. They spent most of their time in meditation, sitting perfectly still for hours at a time. The Council's decision had been to allow limited demonstrations of human capabilities. They would start with one problem, the genetic degradation affecting the Andromedan species. Ambassador Kethvar had been assigned as one of the official observers. His natural patience and detailed record-keeping made him perfect for documenting whatever the humans were about to attempt. The Andromedans were a proud species. Their civilization was over 2 million years old, and they had contributed much to galactic culture. But for the past 100,000 years, they had been slowly dying out. Their genetic code was breaking down, causing each new generation to be weaker and shorter-lived than the last. The best minds in the galaxy had studied the problem. Thousands of scientists from hundreds of species had tried to find a solution. Nothing worked. The Andromedans faced extinction within another 1,000 years. Dr. Zephys Knox, the lead Andromedan scientist, was skeptical as she led the human team to their research facilities on Andromeda Prime. She had spent her entire life trying to save her species. The idea that 3 mysterious humans could succeed where everyone else had failed seemed impossible. Our genetic structure is unlike anything else in the galaxy, she explained as they walked through the laboratory corridors. We evolved on a world with extreme radiation. Our DNA includes quantum components that exist in multiple states simultaneously. When those components decay, they take the rest of our genetic code with them. Dr. Chen Okafor listened carefully, her strange eyes taking in every detail of the laboratory equipment. May we examine some tissue samples? Of course. But I should warn you that every scan we've ever done has failed to find the root cause of the degradation. The quantum components exist outside normal space-time. Our best equipment can barely detect them. Dr. Okoye Singh stepped forward. Dr. Zephys Knox, may we use our own scanning methods? You brought equipment? Not exactly. Dr. Santos Kim moved to the sample container that held Andromedan tissue. She placed her hands on either side of it but didn't touch the container itself. Her eyes closed, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the air around the container began to shimmer. Dr. Zephys Knox gasped. Her instruments were detecting energy patterns unlike anything they had ever recorded. The readings didn't make sense. The scanners showed the sample being examined by something that registered as both electromagnetic radiation and conscious thought. Fascinating, Dr. Chen Okafor said, though she wasn't looking at any instruments. The quantum components aren't decaying randomly. They're being disrupted by something external. External? Dr. Zephys Knox checked her readings. But we've scanned for every possible form of interference. Dr. Okoye Singh opened his eyes. They seemed to glow with a faint inner light. The interference isn't coming from this dimension. It's bleeding through from what your people call the Shadow Realm. Dr. Zephys Knox stumbled backward. The Shadow Realm was an Andromedan myth. Ancient stories told of a dark place that existed alongside normal reality, where hungry things waited to devour light and life. The Shadow Realm is just a legend, she whispered. Many legends are based on real phenomena that ancient civilizations couldn't understand, Dr. Santos Kim replied. Your ancestors detected something interfering with their biology. They created stories to explain what they sensed but couldn't measure. Over the next week, the humans worked with Andromedan scientists to map the interference patterns. Using methods that seemed to combine technology with meditation, they traced the source of the genetic degradation to dimensional weak points scattered across Andromedan space. The solution is relatively simple, Dr. Chen Okafor explained to the gathered scientists. We need to seal the dimensional barriers at these weak points. Your genetic code will stabilize once the interference stops. How do we seal barriers between dimensions? Asked Dr. Zephys Knox. With this. Dr. Okoye Singh produced a small device that looked like it had been grown rather than built. Its surface shifted and flowed like liquid metal, but it felt solid when touched. What is it? A dimensional stabilizer. It will anchor the barriers between realities in your local space. Dr. Zephys Knox examined the device with every scanner she had. The readings were impossible. The device seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, just like Andromedan quantum genetics. But instead of decaying, it was perfectly stable. How does it work? Dr. Santos Kim smiled. It thinks the barrier's closed. I don't understand. Consciousness can affect reality at the quantum level. This device contains a fragment of expanded consciousness trained to maintain dimensional stability. It doesn't use force or energy. It simply believes that the barriers are sealed, and reality adjusts to match that belief. The concept was so alien that Dr. Zephys Knox needed several days to understand it. But when they tested the device, it worked exactly as the humans had promised. The dimensional barriers around Andromeda Prime sealed completely. For the first time in 100,000 years, new Andromedan births showed no genetic degradation. Word of the success spread quickly through Council space. Representatives from dozens of species began making requests for human assistance with their own unsolvable problems. The Energy Collective had been struggling with power shortages for millennia. Their civilization required enormous amounts of energy, but they had exhausted most of the usable resources in their region of space. Dr. Chen Okafor and her team arrived at Energy Collective Prime 3 weeks later. The planet was a massive construction of metal and crystal, designed to channel and store vast amounts of power. But even their most advanced fusion reactors couldn't meet the population's needs. Chief Engineer Vextar was an ancient being made of living electricity. He had been working on the energy crisis for over 10,000 years. We've tried everything, he told the humans. Fusion, antimatter, zero-point extraction, stellar engineering. Nothing produces enough clean energy for our needs. Dr. Okoye Singh studied the power distribution network. The problem isn't production. It's that you're trying to extract energy from existing matter and forces. What if instead you borrowed energy from quantum foam? Quantum foam? Vextar's electrical field flickered with confusion. That's just theoretical. It represents the constant creation and destruction of virtual particles in empty space. It's not empty, Dr. Santos Kim corrected. Space at the quantum level is full of energy. Infinite energy, constantly appearing and disappearing. We've learned to stabilize some of that energy before it disappears. She produced another device, similar to the dimensional stabilizer, but somehow different. This one seemed to vibrate with contained power. This is a quantum foam tap. It convinces virtual particles to become real before they decay back into nothing. The energy output is essentially limitless. Chief Engineer Vextar was skeptical until they connected the device to a test grid. The power readings immediately jumped to levels that should have been impossible. Clean, stable energy flowed from what appeared to be empty space. How is this possible? Dr. Chen Okafor's expression was patient. When consciousness exists partially outside normal space-time, it can interact with quantum probability. We've learned to nudge reality in directions that benefit those around us. Within a month, quantum foam taps were installed throughout Energy Collective space. The energy crisis that had plagued them for centuries ended overnight. Next came the Ethereal Collective. This species existed primarily as pure thought, maintaining physical bodies only when necessary, but something had damaged their group mind, fragmenting their consciousness into isolated individuals who could no longer properly communicate. The humans solved this problem too. They used a device that seemed to be made of crystallized thought itself. It repaired the damaged psychic pathways and restored the Ethereal Collective's mental unity. Each success brought new requests. The crystal gardens, which had been slowly dying for unknown reasons, were restored to full health. The Nomad Fleet's ships, which had been breaking down due to metal fatigue that no one could explain, were made stronger than they had ever been. Ambassador Kethvar watched all of this with growing unease. He had been assigned to observe and document every human intervention. His detailed reports went directly to Council intelligence. The humans never asked for payment. They never demanded territory or resources. They simply solved problems and moved on to the next crisis. But Kethvar's trained observer's eye noticed things that others missed. The quantum foam taps didn't just provide energy. They also included monitoring systems that tracked power usage patterns throughout energy collective space. The dimensional stabilizers did more than seal barriers. They also created a subtle quantum entanglement between Andromedan space and some unknown location. Every solution the humans provided included hidden features, nothing harmful but always something extra, something that created connections. Kethvar tried to discuss his concerns with other observers, but everyone was too impressed by the humans' successes to listen. Centuries-old problems were being solved in weeks. Species that had faced extinction were saved. Council Intelligence Director Zarthul rarely called emergency meetings. In his 5,000 years of service, he could count such gatherings on his shadow claws. But tonight, in the deepest levels beneath Council Prime, representatives from 12 species sat around a table that had never been used before. The meeting was so secret that it didn't officially exist. No records would be kept, no transcripts would be made. The people in this room were the galaxy's best minds for detecting hidden threats and uncovering conspiracies. 6 months, Director Zarthul began, his dark form shifting in the dim light. 6 months since the humans returned. In that time, they have solved 47 major crises affecting 23 different species. Around the table, heads nodded. Everyone had heard the success stories, the miraculous cures, the impossible technologies, the solutions to problems that had plagued civilizations for millennia. Ambassador Kethvar's observations led us to examine these solutions more carefully, Zarthul continued. What we found is disturbing. Chief Analyst Morthen of the Quantum Collective leaned forward. Her species existed partially in probability space, making them excellent at detecting hidden patterns. Every human solution includes components that weren't requested. Monitoring systems, quantum entanglements, consciousness interfaces. At first glance, they appear to be maintenance and support features. But when we map them all together, added security expert Vexdor of the military caste, they form a network. Every system the humans have touched is now connected to every other system they've touched. Director Zarthul activated a holographic display in the center of the table. The image showed the galaxy with glowing lines connecting dozens of star systems. The pattern was beautiful and terrifying. This is the current extent of human influence. Every glowing line represents a connection between systems they've modified. What you're looking at is a galaxy-spanning network that didn't exist 6 months ago. Researcher Keksnadi of the DeepMind Institute studied the pattern carefully. The connections aren't just technological. Some of them appear to be quantum entangled, creating instant communication across vast distances. Others seem to be what we might call consciousness links, mental connections between different species. More concerning, Director Zarthul said, manipulating the display to show energy flow patterns, is that every connected system is slowly becoming dependent on the others. The quantum foam taps don't just provide energy to the energy collective, they're also powering Andromedan genetic stabilizers, ethereal psychic networks, and crystal garden growth matrices. The implications hit everyone in the room at the same time. Tactical analyst Hixvar spoke what they were all thinking. If any part of the network fails, everything connected to it could collapse. Worse than that, added Chief Analyst Morthen. We've detected signs that the humans can control these systems remotely. The consciousness components in each device respond to specific quantum signatures that match the human's expanded awareness. Ambassador Kethvar, who had been invited as the primary observer, raised one of his 4 hands. Director Zarthul, have we considered that this might be intentional? That the humans are deliberately creating dependencies? That's exactly what we've concluded, Zarthul replied grimly. But the question is why? What do they gain from creating a galaxy-wide network under their control? Researcher Keksnadi accessed her portable database. I've been studying historical patterns of conquest and control. Most aggressive species use force to dominate others, but the most effective method is creating dependencies. Make yourself indispensable, and resistance becomes impossible. But the humans aren't demanding anything, protested cultural analyst Dexmore. They're not asking for territory, resources, or political power. They're just helping. Security expert Vextor's military training made him naturally suspicious. Maybe what they want isn't material. Maybe they want something else entirely. Director Zarthul nodded. That's what we need to find out. And we need to find out quickly, because the dependency network is expanding rapidly. 3 more species requested human assistance this week. He changed the holographic display to show projected future connections. If the current rate continues, 70% of council space will be dependent on human systems within 2 years. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Ambassador Kethvar finally spoke up. What do we do? We can't just accuse them without proof. And we can't deny the benefits they've provided. The Andromedans would be extinct without human intervention. We need more information, Director Zarthul decided. Covert investigation teams will examine human-modified systems more thoroughly. We need to understand exactly how their network functions and what controls they've built into it. Over the next month, the galaxy's best infiltration specialists worked to uncover the truth about human technology. What they found was both fascinating and terrifying. The devices the humans provided were far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. Each one contained what could only be described as artificial consciousness, thinking machines that existed partially in dimensions beyond normal space. These artificial minds were all connected to each other through quantum entanglement. They shared information instantly across galactic distances. More disturbing, they seemed to be learning and adapting on their own. Infiltration specialist Nexvara of the Shadow Guild discovered something that made Director Zarthul call another emergency meeting. This time, the gathering included military commanders and council security chiefs. The artificial consciousness components aren't just learning about the systems they're installed in, Nexvara reported. They're learning about us. Every conversation near a human device is recorded and analyzed. Every action taken by anyone connected to the network is monitored and cataloged. Fleet Admiral Korthak, the military's senior commander, slammed his massive fist on the table. They're spying on the entire galaxy. More than spying, corrected technical analyst Vexpre. They're creating a complete behavioral profile of every species in their network. They know our capabilities, our weaknesses, our thought patterns, our decision-making processes. Director Zarthul felt a chill run through his shadow form. They've been studying us, learning everything about how we think and act. Chief Analyst Morthen brought up new data on her personal display. I've been analyzing the timing of human interventions. They didn't respond to requests for help randomly. They specifically chose problems that would create maximum dependency with minimum effort. What do you mean? Asked Fleet Admiral Korthak. The Andromedan genetic crisis affected their entire species. Solving it made every Andromedan grateful and dependent. The Energy Collective's power shortage affected their ability to maintain their technology. Solving it made them dependent on human quantum foam taps. The Ethereal Collective's psychic fragmentation affected their ability to function as a society. Solving it made them dependent on human consciousness repair systems. The pattern was clear once someone pointed it out. The humans had targeted critical infrastructure problems that affected entire civilizations. Their solutions were perfectly designed to create lasting dependencies. They've been planning this, Director Zarthul realized. Every move they've made has been calculated to create maximum dependency with minimum resistance. Security expert Vextor pulled up intelligence reports. We've also discovered that they knew about each crisis before they were officially asked for help. Communication logs show that they were preparing solutions before the requests were even submitted. How is that possible? Demanded Fleet Admiral Korthak. Ambassador Kethvar thought back to his observations of the humans during their first appearance at Council Prime. They said they can perceive time non-linearly. They see the future. The implications were staggering. If the humans could see the future, then every decision the Council had made was probably already known to them. Every move, every countermove, every attempt at resistance, all of it anticipated and planned for. We need to confront them, Fleet Admiral Korthak declared. Demand answers about what they're really doing. With what leverage? Asked Director Zarthul. Half the galaxy is already dependent on their systems. If they withdraw their support, billions could die. Technical analyst Vexpre brought up a new concern. There's something else. I've detected signs that the human network is beginning to influence decision-making processes in connected species. Subtle nudges that encourage certain choices over others. Mental manipulation. Director Zarthul's shadow form darkened with anger. Not exactly manipulation, more like guidance. The consciousness components seem to be encouraging decisions that increase network efficiency and reduce conflict between connected species. Chief Analyst Morthen was studying the data streams. The humans aren't forcing compliance. They're making compliance seem like the natural choice. Every decision that strengthens the network feels logical and beneficial to the species making it. The room fell silent again. What they were describing wasn't conquest in any traditional sense. It was something far more subtle and sophisticated. The humans were reshaping galactic civilization from within, making changes that seemed beneficial while creating an infrastructure of absolute control. Fleet Admiral Korthek had never surrounded a diplomatic vessel before. His massive war fleet hung in space around the human ships like predators circling prey, 50 of the galaxy's most advanced warships, bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. The human ships looked small and fragile by comparison. But Admiral Korthek had read the intelligence reports. He knew that appearances could be deceiving when dealing with beings who existed partially outside normal reality. Human vessels, he broadcast on all frequencies. This is Fleet Admiral Korthek of the Galactic Council Defense Force. You will submit to immediate inspection and surrender all control systems for the network you have created. The response came quickly. Dr. Chen Okafor's voice was as calm as ever. Admiral Korthek, we understand your concerns. Dr. Santos Kim will meet with your delegation aboard our primary vessel. Director Zarthul, monitoring from his command ship, felt a chill. The humans weren't surprised by the military confrontation. They had been expecting it. Admiral, Zarthul said over a secure channel, proceed with caution. If they were expecting this, they may have prepared countermeasures. Admiral Korthek selected a small team for the boarding. Himself, Director Zarthul, Ambassador Kethvar, and Chief Analyst Morthen. If the humans wanted to eliminate the leadership investigating them, this would be their chance. The human ship's docking bay was unlike anything in galactic databases. The walls seemed to be alive, shifting and flowing like liquid metal. The lighting came from sources that couldn't be identified. The air tasted of possibilities. Dr. Santos Kim waited for them alone. Her human appearance was perfect, but something about her presence filled the docking bay with an awareness that felt infinite. Welcome aboard the Consciousness of Stars, she said. Please follow me to the central chamber. As they walked through corridors that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, Ambassador Kethvar tried to map the ship's layout. It was impossible. Passages led to rooms that were larger than the entire vessel should have been. Windows showed views of space that couldn't exist from their current location. Your ship defies physics, Admiral Korthek observed. Physics as you understand it, Dr. Santos Kim corrected. When consciousness becomes the primary tool for manipulating reality, traditional physical laws become suggestions rather than rules. They entered a chamber that took Admiral Korthek's breath away. The room was vast, containing what appeared to be a miniature galaxy. Stars, planets, and nebulae floated in space that shouldn't have fit inside any ship. This is beautiful, Chief Analyst Morthen whispered. This is terrifying, Director Zarthul corrected. Dr. Santos Kim gestured to floating platforms that had appeared in the center of the chamber. Please be seated. You have questions about our network and our intentions. We're prepared to answer them honestly. Admiral Korthek remained standing, his massive frame tense with suspicion. We know about your control systems. We know you've been spying on every species connected to your network. We know you can manipulate behavior and decision-making. What we don't know is why. To save you, Dr. Santos Kim replied simply. From what? From extinction. The chamber around them shifted, and suddenly they were no longer inside a ship. They stood in space itself, surrounded by stars and galaxies. But something was wrong with the view. Large sections of space were completely dark. Empty voids where galaxies should have been. This is the Andromeda Galaxy as it exists now, Dr. Santos Kim explained. Or rather, as it doesn't exist. Director Zarthul felt his shadow form contract with fear. What happened to it? It was consumed. Every star, every planet, every thinking being. All of it gone, leaving behind empty space where consciousness once existed. The view shifted, showing galaxy after galaxy reduced to nothingness. Millions of star systems that had simply stopped existing. This is what's coming to your galaxy, Dr. Santos Kim continued. An entity that feeds on consciousness itself. It doesn't destroy matter. It devours the very concept of awareness, leaving behind universe where thought never existed. Ambassador Kethvar found his voice. How do you know this? Because we encountered the survivors. In the deep void between galaxies, we found refugees from consumed realities, beings that had escaped the hunger by existing in dimensions it couldn't reach. Admiral Korthak was still skeptical. Even if this threat is real, why should we trust you? Why should we believe that your network is the solution? Dr. Santos Kim looked at him with eyes that contained infinite sadness. Because the entity can only consume individual consciousness. It feeds on separation, on the barriers between minds. But consciousness that is truly unified, truly connected, becomes something it cannot digest. The space around them changed again, showing complex mathematical models and probability calculations. Chief Analyst Morthen recognized some of the formulas. Quantum consciousness theory, dimensional mathematics, probability cascade functions. Your network, she realized. You're trying to unify all conscious beings in the galaxy into a single entity. Not a single entity, Dr. Santos Kim corrected. A unified entity. Individual consciousness preserved but connected like neurons in a brain. Each species maintaining its unique nature while being part of something larger. Director Zarthul's worst fears were being confirmed. You want to assimilate us. Make us part of your collective consciousness. We want to save you. The choice of methods was limited by the time constraints. Admiral Korthak slammed his fist into empty space, somehow creating a solid impact. This is exactly what we feared. You're trying to control us, eliminate our freedom, make us into extensions of yourselves. Dr. Santos Kim's expression became infinitely patient. Admiral, what is freedom worth if you're dead? What is individual choice worth if your entire species is erased from existence? It's worth everything, Admiral Korthak replied firmly. We'd rather die free than live as slaves. Even if your death means the end of all consciousness in the galaxy? Even if choosing individual freedom dooms trillions of beings who haven't been given a choice? The question hung in the space between them. Ambassador Kethvar felt the weight of it pressing down on his consciousness. How long do we have? He asked quietly. The entity's scouts will arrive in 47 years. The main force will follow within another decade. Based on our projections, an unconnected galaxy has less than a 5% chance of survival. And with your network? Asked Chief Analyst Morthen. 87% chance of survival, with most individual consciousness preserved. Director Zarthul was still trying to process the implications. Why didn't you tell us this from the beginning? Why the deception? Dr. Santos Kim's smile was sad. Because we've been through this conversation 800,000 years ago. We told the Council about the coming threat. We explained the need for unity. We were honest about our abilities and our plans. The space around them shifted again, showing historical records from the ancient archives. Images of humans standing before the original Galactic Council, making presentations about dimensional threats and consciousness unity. Your ancestors' response was to banish us as dangerous madmen. They refused to believe in threats they couldn't see or understand. They chose the comfort of familiar divisions over the uncertainty of necessary change. Admiral Korthak stared at the historical images. You're saying we've had this conversation before? Many times. In many timelines. This is the only approach that has any chance of success. Gradual integration through beneficial services, creating dependencies slowly enough that resistance is minimized. You manipulated us, Director Zarthul accused. We guided you toward survival, Dr. Santos Kim corrected. Every choice you made was still your choice. We simply ensured that the beneficial choices seemed more attractive than the harmful ones. Chief Analyst Morthen was studying the probability calculations floating in the space around them. These models show billions of different timeline branches. You've been calculating every possible outcome. For 800,000 years, we've explored every alternative, every approach, every possible method of preparing the galaxy for what's coming. This is the only path that leads to survival. Ambassador Kethvar felt a terrible understanding settling over him. You've already won, haven't you? Even this confrontation is part of your plan. Dr. Santos Kim nodded. This conversation was necessary. You needed to understand the truth, to make an informed choice about what comes next. The network exists and cannot be easily dismantled without catastrophic consequences, but you can choose how to proceed. What choices do we have? Admiral Korthek demanded, "You can fight us. Attempt to destroy the network and face the coming threat divided and unprepared. You can accept integration willingly and help us prepare more efficient defenses. Or you can do nothing and let events proceed as they have been." Director Zarthul realized the cruel elegance of the trap. Fighting would likely result in galactic-wide system failures and billions of deaths. Accepting would mean surrendering galactic independence. Doing nothing would mean slow but inevitable assimilation. "How do we know you're telling the truth about this entity?" he asked. "Because in approximately 6 months, your deep space monitoring systems will detect the first scout probes entering the galaxy from intergalactic space."